I've been playing drums for 20 years, starting off playing in basements of closets to now playing 20,000 person arenas like this one that I'm playing tonight. And additionally, I have created drum lessons that have helped tens of thousands of drummers. Now I'm gonna compress 20 years of brutal drumming advice and give you a clear path to follow so you can avoid all the mistakes that I made and make progress a lot faster than I did. You will learn thousands of fills in an instant. I felt like I sucked compared to every single person in the room. You might not like what I have to say here. You are not as good as you think you are. Stop trying to learn a million drum beats that you play poorly. Instead, learn a few and totally nail them. For example, let's take a look at Phil Rudd, the drummer of AC/DC. He's worth over $50 million. Now, how did he make all of that money? Well, by basically playing one simple drum beat. The secret that too many drummers ignore is that if you master this one simple drum beat, you will instantly learn how to play hundreds, if not thousands of songs. Every beginner drummer should know this 4 on the floor beat. The mistake that drummers make is once they learn this beat, they immediately move on. But what you should really do is learn how to play this beat in a multitude of ways. And to do that, I created something that I call the double note framework. Step 1 is to nail the original 4 on the floor drum beat. Step 2 is you can start to transform this drum beat by doubling the notes. For example, if you go from playing quarter notes on the hi-hat to eighth notes, you've doubled the notes, and now the beat has a little bit more momentum to it. Once you've nailed that, you can double the notes again by playing what's called 16th notes. This is where you are playing the hi-hat 16 times within the length of one drum beat. Remember, the more ways you can play a single drum beat, the better and more versatile drummer you will be. Now, speaking of practicing beats, most beginners aren't actually practicing at all because they don't know how to practice in the first place. The biggest thing that every beginner drummer should know is that there is a difference between playing and practicing. When I first started playing drums, I started by learning songs that I like to play. And in the beginning, it actually ended up helping me learn a lot and I got better until that totally stopped. That's because I thought just jamming was practicing. But instead what I was doing was ignoring all of the things I was bad at, which was not getting me any better. But if you can create a plan around your weaknesses, that is the quickest way to shortcut your progress. And I've given you a clear drumming path to help you level up your drumming with DBO Academy. Click the link below to start your free trial. Beginner drummers, stop overcomplicating your drum fills. You wanna know the secret to 95% of Travis Barker's best drum fills? Well, most of them are built on the simplest sticking pattern ever, which is the single stroke roll. If you can master this sticking pattern, you will learn thousands of fills in an instant. Think of this reframing. Beginner drummers who know 10 fills poorly only know how to play 10 fills. But the drummers who can master just one fill are instantly able to transform it into hundreds of fills. Let me explain. When you master a simple fill or sticking pattern, it allows you to move that pattern around the kit in an infinite number of ways, like this, or like this. So how can you do it for yourself? Well, step 1 is to learn this simple pattern. In this case, it's the single stroke roll. Step 2 is to learn it in a new way by adding an accent on the first note of every pattern. Once you've got that down, you can start accenting the upbeats, which is harder because now you have to use your weak hand to accent, which feels more uncomfortable, but it just takes more time. And trust me, it's time well spent. And finally, step 4 is to combine all of these accents in a random fashion and get used to playing them around the kit. If you take the time to really master this, you will be able to play 90 to 95% of all drum fills in any song. Social media is a trap. This takes zero skill improvement. It's just a simple mindset shift. You can't play it because you haven't spent enough time with it. You suck, get used to it. Now, once you nail these basics, it will push you out of the beginner phase fairly quickly, but it's at this point that you start to hit an invisible ceiling. So how can you break through this so that you can keep making progress? Well, let's start off with one simple trick that improves the sound of all of your beats and fills by 100%, and it takes zero skill to learn. Here's the brutal truth. In most cases, if you can't hit your drums with conviction, no one will like the sound of your drumming. This is a simple strategy that drummers like Dave Grohl and Chad Smith use that draws so many people to their drumming. And it's just the fact that they hit their drums hard. The best way to sound confident on the kit is to hit your drums confidently. But of course, there are nuances. So we want to get comfortable playing at all dynamic volume levels. So anytime you're learning a new beat or fill, follow this 3-step process. First, learn to play the beat incredibly quietly. Then learn how to play that same beat at a medium volume. And then finally, you guessed it, learn how to play the beat at a loud volume. Too many beginner drummers can only play a drum beat at one of these volume levels, but the best drummers are able to play at all volumes and know when to play quiet and when to play loud. Now, if you don't follow this next advice, it'll most likely end up with you hating the drums and feeling incredibly discouraged every time you try to play. Again, this takes zero skill improvement. It's just a simple mindset shift. And that is, beginner drummers need to stop comparing themselves to other drummers. Instead, only focus on your own progress and only compare yourself to where you were last week or last month. The brutal truth is social media is a trap, and comparing yourself to social media drummers will only kill your motivation and confidence, because what you don't see is the years and years of work that these drummers have put in to get to the level that they're at. So if you're 3 months into drumming, don't compare yourself to someone who's 20 years in. Maybe compare yourself to where they were 3 months into drumming. If you can keep your head down and focus on your progress alone, that is what's going to keep drumming fun. That's what's going to keep it motivating for you, which is key for continued improvement. Now, there's one lie that a lot of beginner drummers believe that lead them down a very expensive path, and as a result, leaves them spending way too much money and not getting any better at the drums. And it's the lie that better gear will make you a better drummer. The truth is, in most cases, better gear does not improve your skill. Let's take a look at drummers like Darren King, who play insane stuff like this on somewhat crappy gear. The reality is that fancy gear will not fix your bad technique. I have so many drummers that come to me talking about how they can't play a certain pattern because of their pedal settings or because of the sticks that they're playing. The reality is you can't play it because you haven't spent enough time with it. Gear is awesome and it can improve your overall sound, but it's not going to improve your playing. The quickest hack to get a better drum sound out of a cheap drum set is to invest in coated drum heads and tuning them well. I promise you, you can get almost any drum set to sound good with well-tuned heads. Outside of that, good cymbals are always going to elevate your sound, but again, not elevate your skill. I felt like I sucked compared to every single person in the room. Then you are wasting a lot of your practice time. Nothing that you work on or play will sound good. Now that we've gotten the quick mindset shifts that are going to help you elevate your skill, this is where we get to the brutal section. You might not like what I have to say here, but it is the brutally honest truth, and I believe that beginner drummers have to hear this in order to make real progress. The brutal truth is, if you're a beginner drummer, you suck. Get used to it. Now, Jojo Mayer, a very famous and prolific drummer, has an amazing quote that says, "Practice what you can't play. If you sound good while practicing, you're not getting any better." Now, too many beginner drummers practice what they're good at over and over again because they are afraid of sucking. But if you don't sound bad while practicing, well, then you're not actually practicing. The more you can be okay with sucking and sounding bad and just trying to make yourself sound a little bit better each day, the better you will get. But then once you don't suck at that thing anymore, it's time to find the other thing that you suck at and lean into that. Now, during your practice time, I like to have an even split of things that I like and things that I don't like. Because if practicing is always unenjoyable, I'm much less inclined to actually do it. So for me, I have a practice framework that's very simple that I call the jam sandwich. Step one is when I first step behind the kit, I jam to songs that I like, maybe 3 or 4 so that I can warm up doing something that's fun for me and I kind of get it out of my system. Then step 2 is I work on something that I'm really bad at. Remember, we have to practice on our weaknesses so that they can become strengths. And then as a reward at the end of my practice session, I jam to more songs, and I might even try to incorporate what I practice into those songs. But if you aren't practicing with this one simple tool, then you are wasting a lot of your practice time. That leads us to our next brutal truth, which is if you are not practicing to a metronome, you are practicing for failure. As a drummer, if you don't have good timing, nothing that you work on or play will sound good. Because everything, it doesn't matter how simple or advanced it is, it will start to sound sloppy if the timing is not locked in. And if you hope to play in any type of gig setting, 98% of bands require playing along to a metronome. So it is a key thing that every beginner drummer should be working on in every practice session. Now, this is a brutal truth that a lot of drummers have a very difficult time accepting. And that is that you should stop chasing speed. Speed is only a byproduct of control. You can only learn how to play something fast if you can nail how to play it incredibly slow. Anytime I learn something new, I start at 60 BPM. And guess what? Sometimes I have to practice it even slower than that. And then the mistake that drummers make is they nail it at 60 BPM and then they move it to 100. I only move up in increments of 5 BPM at a time. This is what's going to give you control over everything that you do, which will allow speed to come so much faster. If you've gone through this whole process that we've talked about up until this point, the next step for you is to get out there. But the first thing you should do to get out there is to record yourself, because the brutal truth, you are not as good as you think you are. Hearing your own drumming back is humbling, because this is what's going to highlight so many of your mistakes and so many of your weaknesses. And again, way too many drummers avoid recording themselves because they're afraid of sucking. But if you are open to sucking and improving your weaknesses every step of the way, then you should absolutely record yourself at the end of all of your practice sessions. This gives you a new perspective on your drumming. It shows you exactly what you need to work on. It allows you to hear your drumming in a new way. And trust me, it does sound different than how it sounds when you are behind the kit. I have so many students that have an aversion to recording themselves, but once they actually break that barrier, they're able to analyze their drumming in a whole new way. And I can see their drumming get so much better within just 1 month of recording themselves. But if you're too afraid to record yourself, then you will definitely be too afraid to do this next thing, which I believe will add a level of pressure that is necessary for every drummer to experience. And that is the fact that you need to start playing with other musicians. And the brutal truth is, if you are not the worst musician in the room, then you are missing out on an incredible opportunity to grow and learn at a rapid rate. When I was 13 years old, I surrounded myself with musicians who were in their late teens to early 20s. When I was 18 years old, I surrounded myself with musicians who were in their 30s, 40s, and 50s. Now here's the reality. In all of those situations, I felt like I sucked compared to every single person in the room. But what that did is it created a fire within me to try to close that gap between me and those other musicians as quickly as possible. But I also had more resources and relationships in my life to give me advice based on what they know. And I have more opportunities of having to show up at my best level. Finally, I'm going to leave you with the brutal advice that failure is not something to avoid, it's something to expect. When we try to avoid failure, we avoid chances to learn and grow. And there are only 2 outcomes. You either win or you learn. If you put yourself out there and you nail an audition, then congrats, you just got a new gig. Or if you put yourself out there and you failed the audition, then congrats, you just learned a lot of what you need to improve to be able to pass the audition next time around. But what most drummers of all levels do is they get scared of the opportunity to fail. When something scares me, that's when I know I actually should be pursuing it, because the only 2 outcomes on the other side I know will both be good for me in the long run. And that's what allowed me to land a ton of gigs, including my gig with I Prevail. And if you're a drummer who wants brutally honest advice on how to land a solid gig, well then click this video right here.